Many thanks to Jerb, Skillspeeder Gaming, Jaren, DayZ Podcast, and TaggisTagWest for making this video possible. Huge balancing changes have come to DayZ 1.12 that drastically impacts weapon damage and armor values in-game, potentially changing gunplay as a whole and shaping the future of DayZ combat as we know it. So in this video I'm going to be breaking down what these changes are by covering these 4 topics. If you didn't know, when you get shot you take health, blood and shock damage. Here is how much health damage each ammo type did before 1.12 in the chest of a naked player. And here are the changes added in this patch. So looking at buckshot, that's a reduction of 27% as it's gone from 34 damage per pellet to 25 damage per pellet instead. And just in case you didn't know, it fires 8 pellets at a time, so that's 200 damage per shot it does now, which means raiding will be more difficult in this patch. Second, we have slugs for the shotguns again, and this weapon has no change when it comes to health damage. 5.56 rounds fired by the M4 and the AK-101 with a monstrous buff here of 81% extra damage per shot, capable of one-shotting a player in the chest up close. However, looking at the ammo used by the AK-74s, there's only a 36% damage buff here compared, making the AK-74s the inferior weapon for damage among the assault rifles. The 7.62x5.4s fired by the Mosin and the SVD are up a huge 54% in damage, along with the Winchester rounds having the same damage buff. The 7.62x3.9s fired by the AKM and SKS are up a giant 81% like the 5.56 rounds. The 45 rounds have the smallest buff here of just 1 extra damage or an increase of 3%. But that's good compared to the 3.57 rounds which have a monstrous nerf of 52% less damage, now inflicting over 50% less damage per shot, and yes, this applies to the Magnum, Deagle and the Repeater. The 9mm rounds are up 34%, which is surprising because they do the same damage as the 45 rounds now. The 380s are up a nice 42%, bringing the Makarov more in line with the other pistols in the game. However, the MK2 and Sporter are still very weak with a buff of just 11%, buffing up to 20 damage instead of 18. The 9x3.9s now have 25% less damage at minus 26% damage here, and the rubber slugs have a 50% boost in health damage, not that it has much health damage. Moving on to blood damage, there are no changes to blood damage as far as I can tell in this patch. If you've noticed any changes, let me know in the comments. And the third type of damage is shock damage, which has changed a lot in this patch too. Here are the numbers from the previous patches, and these are the shock damage values from 1.12. To blast through this quickly, here are all the percentage changes to shock damage. So if you want to knock a player out in this patch, these are the best rounds to do so, with the best here being the rubber shells doing twice the shock damage they did in previous patches. I think until there's been more time, it's difficult to say if more firefights will end in someone going unconscious now, but judging by what I've seen so far, that will probably be the case, meaning that players will probably need to manage their shock stat better now and use shock as a tactic to bring down enemies. Moving on to the second on our list, and that's damage drop-off. In previous patches, damage would remain the same until it lost a certain percentage of its velocity, resulting in lines like this that show a fixed amount of damage, then a steep drop-off over time. However, in this patch, the distance at which damage remains fixed is much lower now. It almost doesn't exist in the game anymore, but it does still exist. For example, this is the 5.56 round fired with the M4 and the AK-101. In previous patches it did 55 damage, and the damage of this round didn't start dropping off until 330 meters, which means it would do 55 damage up until 330 meters and then start to drop off like this. Now, as I showed you earlier, the 5.56 round does 100 damage per shot now and drops off after just 5% of its velocity being lost. So at just 70 meters, the 5.56 round will no longer one-shot a player as seen here. However, because of the way the damage drop-off formula works, if it still works the same way, the sooner the damage drops off, the slower it drops off too. So while it does drop off sooner at 70 meters, it drops off much slower over its remaining distance. Most rounds in DayZ are like this now, so that means that most rounds in DayZ will drop off damage much slower. Third on our list is armor, and I'm sure this is one that many people are interested in here, specifically the plate carrier vest. In previous patches, this vest could tank 8 shots from the 9mm and 6 shots from the 45 round. Now both of these weapons require 10 shots to kill a player with a pristine plate carrier on, making lower caliber rounds much weaker against armor. However, because of the damage nerf of the 357 rounds, it will now take you 7 357 rounds to kill a player wearing a plate carrier vest, up from just 2. On the other hand, the AKM and SKS still requires the same amount of shots at 4 shots to kill a player with a plate carrier vest on, so there's no change there. This means that lower caliber rounds in the game are going to be punished when you're fighting against armor. As a tip for the plate carrier vest here, it used to absorb 50% damage, but now as of 1.12 absorbs 75% damage instead. I'll be doing more tests with armor because that's very interesting to me. I want to know which other armor pieces have changed too, so I'll be doing a stream next week. Finally for this video, stunning players is a topic on a lot of people's minds at the moment. Basically, when you're shot by any ammo type that is not these 3 low caliber rounds, you become stunned. Here is a clip by Mike to show you this in action. The 7.62x39 round fired by the SKS is capable of causing this stun, like most ammo types will in DayZ now. This stun knocks the player back and doesn't allow them to do anything for a certain amount of time, obviously giving the shooter a huge advantage. Now this stun only affects players when they're shot in the head or the torso, and armor doesn't seem to reduce the chance of a stun occurring. In fact, it doesn't seem to be chance based at all. As long as you're using these ammo types and you shoot your enemy in the head or the chest, they will become stunned. As an unintentional bonus here from Mike, he managed to knock this player out with 1 shot. Now because the SKS does 100 damage at this range, it means the stab vest that this player was using protected this guy from certain death. But because the 7.62x39 round now has 110 shock damage, the SKS knocked him out instead, which might mean that shock damage bypasses armor in DayZ. This means armor might only be useful for preventing death, not unconsciousness, resulting in a lot more unconscious gunfights when geared players fight each other, potentially. Now I don't mean to toot my own horn here, but I can imagine the devs will watch this video and read the comments, so this is the time to make your voice heard and ensure the game heads in the right direction, because this patch in particular is pivotal to how PvP will feel in the coming months or even years. Use the comments below on this video, let's give the devs some feedback and make this game better for everybody. A huge thanks to Mike for providing the armor damage numbers in this video. I will be doing more tests on stream to see if we can discover more about armor. Thank you very much for watching and have a good Easter.